It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. And tonight's guest is one of our favorites, a Canadian. We love our Canadians. Her name is Nicolle Kopping-Pavars. She was just on a few minutes ago, and I'm really excited to talk to her. Before we even start, there she is. I need to give credit for this introduction to another one of our recovering litigator. He actually wrote the foreword to our book, and he said, Lisa, you have to meet Nicolle. You're so on the same page. And we finally met a few weeks ago and had a wild conversation, and there were so many things that we wanted to cover, but we're going to try to narrow them down tonight. But Nicolle has a very interesting background and not what you'd expect. So Nicolle, you want to introduce yourself and say what you used to do and what you do now and why?
Sure. Wow. Thank you. And hi, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me to chat and meet your beautiful community. It's very special for me to be able to share my wisdom and my knowledge and to hear and be with all of you. So my name is Nicolle Kopping-Pavars. I am a former family law lawyer, and now I am a mindfulness instructor, a peace coach, and a trauma awareness and responsiveness activist. So that's a whole bunch of stuff, and I have an accent, so I know that sometimes it's like, whoa, what did she say? So I have to tell you, when I get really passionate and excited, I speak really fast and really quickly. So just stop me if it doesn't make sense or the accent is too strong, but it's gonna happen.
That's okay, because you are talking to a New Yorker who also talks very fast and gets very passionate about things. So this is going to be a high-speed conversation. So no problem. I'm sure people will figure it out.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you again.
So one of the things in your background, which you didn't mention specifically, was that you used to be a children's lawyer. And you know that one of the biggest pain points for the people in this community is that they're going through either a high conflict separation or divorce or some kind of crazy post-judgment thing in the legal system where you don't even need to get into all the trauma that we're both aware that they're experiencing, but their top concern is their kids and how my kid's going to be okay. And so from you being an attorney for children or a children's lawyer in Canada, what's something, you said that you had learned a lot from the kids that you worked with. So I want you to get into detail about what you learned and how it made you a better person and also a better parent, in hopes that people listening to this can also share in some of that wisdom and get some tips.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that is such a big question, such a big topic, right? But yes, I was so in Canada we have, it's called the Office of the Children's Lawyer, and you become an agent of the Office of the Children's Lawyer, which means you're court appointed. And you get court appointed if the family is going through such a high conflict. The children need their own representation in the conflict because the judge can't actually tell what's the truth. And the kid's voice has to come into the courtroom. So that's with high conflict. And then the other side that I used to do was I would represent children who had been apprehended from Children's Aid. And sometimes there was actually an overflow where Children's Aid had seen that there was such emotional trauma being caused to the children in the separation that they actually got involved, and it became a child protection case. And so it was kind of toggling two courtrooms. So it was quite interesting. Yes, they were my favorite children. So the youngest client that I had was one. So obviously I couldn't really get instructions from a 1-year-old, but it was just making sure that her rights were being looked after, she was being cared for correctly, and that was a child protection case. And then generally the kids that I could get instruction from were between the ages of 5 and 17 years old. And I can tell you, Lisa, that I would get more wisdom from a 6-year-old than I would get from an adult. Very, very often, these kids knew exactly what was happening, and they were on the ball. And I would always say to the parents, "You've got shrinky dinks." I don't know if you know what shrinky dinks are.
I love shrinky dinks. Yes.
Okay, so I would say to the parents, your child is a shrinky dink. Just because your child is smaller than you doesn't mean they're not seeing, understanding, and actually capturing everything that is going on. What was really informative for me was very often how I got received by the parents. So there were kind of three different camps that I would have. I would either have parents who did not want me there. There was something to hide. Okay. I would have parents who were too accommodating and too sweet and
Interesting.
too we're so happy you're on, and there was just something not right about what they were saying to me, because it was almost as though they needed to convince me that they were right. And very often those parents were, I'm going to use the word most dangerous, although that's not the correct word, but they were, I suppose, the parents that I had to have more caution with, because there was an agenda, and I had to figure out what the agenda was. And very often they were the parents who would say, I've spoken to my child, and they would try and get involved under the pretense of being very caring and supportive. And so those parents are the ones I would sort of check out. And then they would
Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Could you feel it? Like, so was it words that people said, or did you just get so used to it that you could like feel when somebody was presenting falsely?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an energy that I could get, but also it was just a falseness in who they were. Like they I think I just got so used to it that I could just see it automatically. And it was almost as though they were trying to sweet talk me, sweet surrender me into their point of view. I'm such a great parent. I'm so good. I'm a victim. The kids really confide in me. They tell me lots of stuff, and if you need anything more, just let me know. And even though I'd say thank you so much, because I would interview both parents, I would spend quite a bit of time with both parents. And what I always said to the parents is, I didn't care if a lot of the time they were self-represented. I don't know, is that pro se or something? I don't know what that
Yes.
is.
Yes. Yeah. I'm pro se, not with custody, but yeah.
Yeah.
Pro se.
So very often they were self-represented pro se, but that didn't matter because they would still have to produce court documents. So those documents were sent to me beforehand so that I could actually learn about the file and read a bit and see where their points of view would come from. And I always said to the parents beforehand, I have not read the court file. I would never read the court file before I met with the parents. And the reason I wouldn't do that is I said, I don't want to be swayed already from the court documents, because if you have a lawyer that is a very good writer, can write stories really, really well, I'm going to get swayed. Like, it's just automatic. A good story writer is going to be able to kind of convince you initially. And so I never wanted to be swayed by words. I wanted to have a one-on-one with the parents and really understand them, and also understand what they thought about their children, because that was very, very, very important to me as well, that they could describe their kids to me. And so I would spend sometimes up to 2 hours per parent just having an interview with the parents, and I would say, don't make any assumptions, don't assume that I know the story. I may look at you like with complete days. I probably don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about court. So that was just the way that I did it, because I wanted a clean slate when I went in. Once I had then met with them, I would then go to the court documents, and it was easy for me then to see where there were little bits of not okayness or falsities, because I had gone in with a clean slate. So that was just my way of doing it.
Nicolle, let me ask you one question. Did you find that it mattered if you saw one person first, like if you, because we often talk about something called confirmation bias, and that the first story you hear is one you're more likely to believe. Did you feel like that actually made a difference, or because you went in without knowing anything that you were able to balance that?
That's the exact reason why I wouldn't read anything first, because I really just wanted to understand them from their perspective without being swayed by any court documents whatsoever. So I wouldn't, and with me, I'm honestly that type of person who believes you. When you talk to me, I believe you.
Well, that's human nature. That's human nature, right?
Why would you lie to me, a complete stranger? So very often I would, it didn't matter who I saw first. I was really seeing each of them for the first time as a parent. They weren't my clients, so it's a very different lens that you look at the parents with. They were the parents of my clients, and so I had to understand the type of household and parents that they were living with. So it's a very different lens that you go in with. So that's sort of what I would was the first sort of indication that I would have of the parents, is how they were, first of all, how quick they were to respond to my communication. So they would.
Can you give an example, like what's too, like give an example of a communication that you send and what's too quick or what's reasonable?
So when I got appointed by the court, I would send a letter out to each parent saying, "Hi, my name is Nicolle. I've been appointed by the court. I'm a children's lawyer. I would like to schedule an appointment with you so that I can understand your perspective." Most times, I can't always say it was the moms, but the majority of the times it was the moms. Within an hour of my communication going out, they were on the phone, they were talking to me, and so that was always a good indicator of me. They're motivated, they're committed. When I had to send another communication out or do follow-up saying, "Hey, I've sent a correspondence, you haven't got in touch with me," I'm already understanding. It sounds crazy, but even sometimes just within that, I could know that this person on the other side is a narcissist. They don't want me to get involved because they didn't want me involved. They already against me because they can't control me. They can't control the process. The court has appointed somebody who they don't want. So sometimes I can already get a flavor of what my clients are living with. So with that first communication was just a key for me to see how motivated were the parents to have somebody representing the children on the file. And so what I can say is that even if you don't want a children's lawyer on the file for whatever reason, communicate with them straight away. Just respond. "Thank you so much. Can we set up a time to meet?" It's really, really important. First of all, it's just respectful. But second of all, we're watching. Every single thing is going on. And as a children's lawyer, nothing that a parent tells me is privileged. There's no lawyer-client confidentiality between me and a parent. My confidentiality and privilege lies with the children, not with the parents.
All right, so let's keep going. So we were talking about people responding right away, that's good, and it's respectful. You were talking about privilege.
Yes.
That information is not privileged. That and for everybody who's just joining now, Nicolle, actually, you want to just reintroduce yourself, just in case people are watching part 2.
Yeah, sure.
Only
Hi,
just say
everyone.
you are.
Part 2. My name is Nicolle Kopping-Pavars. I am a former family law lawyer and former children's lawyer. Currently, I am now a mindfulness instructor, a peace coach, and a trauma awareness and responsiveness activist. But today, I'm talking about my work as a children's lawyer and how smart my child clients were in my experience.
Yes, okay. And thanks, Nicolle. And so I'm just going to add this to the feed after, and we'll put it together later somehow. But anyway, you were saying that that you meet with parents to get the perspective and figure out what the children are living with, but really your clients are the children, and that there's no attorney-client, there's no attorney-client privilege with the parents because they're not your client. So whatever the parents say, you can share not only with the child, but also with the court, right?
Yeah. And obviously, I would say to the parents, don't think everything you tell. Like, I've got discernment. I'm not going to tell the kids everything,
Right.
but you can't tell me, because they thought they would tell me what they try to do very often, I find, is parents would try. They thought that they could control me, and by controlling me, they could control the process. And that doesn't happen at all. And so I would constantly have to say to them, they'd phone and they'd tell me, this happened to my child and that happened to my child, and I don't think they're going to say anything to you, so do you think you could bring it up at the interview? And I'd say, I don't know. We'll see. If it's a problem for your child will bring it up at the interview. If it's a problem for you, your child won't bring it up at the interview. So you can't coach me into the questions that I have to ask your child. Your child will tell me what is important to them. So it was, for me, with the parents, it was actually all about management of the expectations and being very clear what my role was, and also really talking to them about their responsibility to control the conflict that they were bringing into their child's life. And when I talk about responsibility, I really say it as the term response dash ability. Your response and your ability to stop the harm to your child is up to you. It's not just your responsibility as a parent. You have to control your response ability, because that is important. Your child actually doesn't care about your conflict, so don't bring them into your conflict.
Can you give us some examples of, like, say, a scenario that you saw kind of commonly with that? Because also, as you're talking, I think about with the people in our community who get very frightened when they don't know what's going on and their child is talking to a professional and they're involved in this legal battle and they're just like really scared and they want to, I think it's human nature to want to know and to be like, what is my kid telling you? And to not know and to feel like, what if something terrible happens? What if my child's been so influenced by the other parent that they say things to someone like you, a lawyer for them who's going to listen to what they say?
That's a tough question, because I kind of feel there's sort of the normal type of separation, and then there's the abnormal type where you've got maybe mental health issues, or you've got a narcissistic personality, and those sort of are outside. Like, those are more complicated files.
That's who you're talking to here. Okay. That's us.
I'm going to just put those to the side for like just 30 seconds.
Yep.
Because I'll come back to it. But generally, if you know your children, you know what they're going to say. If you know your children and you are an involved parent, you shouldn't worry about what they're going to say to the lawyer if you're doing everything right. Your kids will see that. That's really, really important. What would raise my red flags is when parents would tell me what they think I'm not seeing, or they would try to put words into the children's mouths. And so we're trained. We know how to interview children. And so very often I once had this file. It was an 8-year-old, they were sisters, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. A horrible, horrible separation. The parents were just, they were doing their best. And these kids got given these parents. And we had to deal with that situation, okay? And in fact, these kids were like role models for me, because they should have been completely screwed up, and they were the most down-to-earth, sweet, kind, well-mannered, beautiful children. So the parents were doing something right, okay? But so remember, it's an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they come into my office and we have a chat, and they come always independently. I never saw kids together, so they would always come in independently. And the first thing we do is we start an interview. The 8-year-old, who was just this delicious, beautiful, very precocious, outgoing child, says to me, Nicolle, I would like to change my last name to my mom's last name. So I went, oh, wow, that's interesting. why do you want to have your mom's last name? Oh, because I don't like having my dad's name. It's just easier, and it's confusing when I have to tell my friends that my name is different to my mom's name, and so I just want to have my mom's name. All very logical answers, you know. And I said to her, wow, like I'm really quite impressed, because most kids don't know that they can change their last name. You bought, like, did you know that you could change? How did you know that you could just change your last name? She goes, I don't know. I just know these things. So I said, okay, it's interesting. So she had an agenda coming in with, I want to change my last name. I no longer want to have my father's last name. We put it to the side. About 30 minutes into the conversation, I come back and I say, oh, I just have a question to ask you about wanting to change your last name. Now, because it wasn't on her agenda, I had now, she'd forgotten all about that conversation. When I brought it back, she couldn't remember the reasons why she wanted to change her last name. And so for me, that was coaching. She was being coached to say, you have to tell your lawyer you want this. And so she'd been well coached. She had very logical answers, everything. But the second she forgot about it and I audibly brought the question back, she couldn't answer it. She couldn't remember any of the answers that she'd had before.
Wow, that's so interesting.
And then when a 5-year-old came in and told me the exact same thing. So it was like, oh, okay, now I didn't have to go and do that same technique again, because now I already knew. So these are the things that we trained to pick up. We trained to pick up when a child has been coached. So to go back to that question, when you've got a narcissistic file or something very, very difficult, if you've got a children's lawyer who's well trained, they'll know when they're being coached. They'll know when the answers they're giving don't reflect their real interests.
How do you handle that, Nicolle? So let's say you see that that child is being coached. What does that mean in terms of how you make an opinion on the case?
Yeah. So there were 3 things that I have to try to remember them because it's been a while. But there were 3 things that that we had to report to on the court. One was consistency. Is a child consistently saying the same thing? One was, oh my God, I'm going to do consistency. Independent, whether consistency, independence, and I can't think of the third one, will come to me.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 things that I was always looking for. So when I could go to a judge, I could say, this child consistently said the same thing. They didn't change their story, because sometimes a child's story would change depending on which parent brought them to the interview. So I would always try and get the parents to swap when they were bringing the kids to me, because then I was able to see the independence and consistency based on who was bringing the children to the interview.
And how many times would you meet with a child generally? So you said sometimes you spend like 2 hours with each parent, but the child was your client. And I know often with some of our people that when they get, they deal with all types of experts who are dealing with evaluating custody on some level. And sometimes they get really worried because they'd say the evaluator isn't spending time talking to my child. They've only met with them once.
Yeah.
How often did you tend to meet with children?
It depended, because young kids, I can't keep them engaged for an hour, you know.
Right.
So it really depended. But generally, so how would it work with me is I would have a very, very quick first initial consult with my children. I always call them my children, my clients. And that was the only interview that I would say, whichever parent is bringing them, the parent can come into that interview, because I was just telling them what my role was. And I would say to the parent, it's very important that you show your child that you trust me. Because if your child sees that you're anxious and you don't want to bring your child to me, and they're not going to trust me. So I said, if your child is anxious, if your child isn't really sure, or they're nervous about meeting another adult, asking them questions, come into that interview with me. So that you need to role model to your client, to your child. So in that interview, it was usually not more than 20 minutes, just a meet and greet. This is my job. Do you have any questions? When can I meet with you again? And I would normally do something engaging that the kid will want to see me again. So I had various tricks of the trade to do that. And then I would, so was the first initial consult. And then I would see them probably 2 or 3 times after that. And then the fourth time that I would see them is when I would have my report written up, and I would go to them. And I always said, you are director of a movie. This is how I would describe my role to them. You are director of the movie. Together, we're going to write the script. And what's going to happen is you've got complete control over the script. But I need your information because I'm the script writer. So I would write the script, and then I would say to them, now as the director, you're going to tell me what you like about the script, what you don't like about the script, what you want me to keep in, what you want to take out. And they would literally say, keep this in, take that out. And then what I would say to them is, now you have to trust me that I'm going to be the best actress in the world. And what's going to happen is I am going to take my head off. When I go into the courtroom, I'm taking my head off my shoulders and I'm putting your head on my shoulders. And I am going to appear to the court the best version of you. And I'm going to do that script exactly as you told me to do that script. So I really got them engaged in creating the script for them of their life. And if they said to me, and sometimes they would say to me, take that out. And that was the most important information. And then it was up to me to have a conversation saying to them, but you mentioned this a lot. This was very important to you. How can I get this important message across if you don't want your mom or your dad or a judge to hear this message? And so then I would have to unpack why they were scared. What was wrong? Where was the fear coming from? And very often I would say to them, you have to trust me. I will get this message across. But if you're not going to allow me to get this message across, I can't get it across. You're my boss over here. And so sometimes what I would say is, would you feel comfortable if I told the judge by themselves? And so your mom and dad weren't in the room at all. And I gave this information to the judge. And I also told the judge not to say anything about what information I've given the judge, but the judge will know. And very often that was what they would allow me to speak to the judge privately about that information. And I was really lucky. The judges, because very often that's how I had to do it. Very often I had files where there was either, unfortunately, I don't know, this is completely anecdotal. There's no statistical science related to this, but very often a high conflict file was because one parent was a narcissist. That was it, So those. And so the judges knew that when I was coming to them about something, they knew that it was serious enough for me to say they don't want either parent to know what they say. Because even if there was a parent who they trusted, they loved, let's say the good parent, or sometimes they just didn't want to get involved in the battle between the good and the bad. They just didn't want to get involved.
Right, because they know they're going to be probably with both parents anyway.
Yeah.
Something you said, you said a lot there. I love the idea about the script and the child being the director. And it's making me think of an interview I just did a couple of weeks ago with a child psychologist who talked about kids' greatest needs, which are attention and control. And so what you just described gives them both. They feel like they have control over something in their lives, and you're giving them attention and saying, you decide what to do, and let's work on this together, and I'll take my head off and put your head on and speak for you. And so one of the big things too that a lot of people are concerned about is that the voice of the child is heard in family court. And what you're describing sounds like a way that it indeed was, with you as the vessel for doing so. What was I going to say? I'm like, there was like a whole bunch of stuff you said that I was writing down. Now I can't. Oh, somebody wrote in the comments that their therapist encouraged them to explain to the child about the ex-husband, the father's inappropriate rages. And she said she followed the therapist's advice, but then after the child met with an attorney, then the mother was accused of coaching. Do you have any comments about that? She said, I just was following what the therapist said.
Yeah. So, great question. And I've had something like that come up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I can't always rely on a parent's self-reporting, because when the parent is telling me something, it's got their own herbs and spices into what they're telling me. So that, again, what I would say to them is thank you. So if they said the father is having violent rages, my child is too scared to say anything, or what can we do, I would always say, I will raise this with my client. And so then I wouldn't go and say, hey, your mom said your dad has violent rages. You know, it would be questions of, how is it at dad's place? What's been happening? And so they also wouldn't know that a parent had told them, because sometimes, you know, it's like they'd say, but I told mom in confidence and she told you. Now I can't trust mom. You know, so they have to be really, really, sometimes kids will tell you they don't want you to fix it. They're just venting. They're venting, you know, and sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes maybe they venting with a little bit of exaggeration. We don't know. And that's why it's so important that I never believed the parent self-reporting. But I always said, if you have a concern, tell me about the concern. I'll raise it with my client. But I had to raise it in a way where it seemed as though they were informing me of it was a problem for them, because sometimes they'd go, yeah, my dad has rages, but I ignore them. But normally it's when he's just had a text from my mom and I just ignore it and he gets over it and it doesn't mean anything, you know. So we always have to know I had to know the context of where the rages were coming from, because she could go home and say, oh, dad got crazy again.
Yeah. It looks like the comment is my son used those words to the evaluator. Daddy had inappropriate reactions. So maybe that's what it is it didn't sound natural. I don't know, like the child's own words.
Yeah, like a 7-year-old. If a 7-year-old says my dad had inappropriate reactions, you go, You know, it's when kids would use big words with me, I would go, wow, that's a big word. I don't know what it means.
Great.
You know,
I love that.
And so then if they could explain it to me, that, like, I had this 10-year-old who his vocabulary was huge. He was a philosophical kid. In fact, I asked him if I could share one of his stories with the judge, like his philosophies of his parents' separation with the judge. And like the judge was blown away. Like this kid was just so philosophical. So sometimes you have kids who genuinely know that language. But
you can tell.
You can tell, you know. So I'd love to share with you some of my secrets that I used.
Okay, before that, one more question just came in. About interviewing. Are all the kids from the same home interviewed? So I think someone had mentioned that at one point only one child was, but the evaluator said that child had nothing to do with it. I can't remember what it said, because that was like not the child involved with the custody issues. How did you deal with kids who were part of a case, but they have, I'm guessing, like a blended family?
Yeah. So for me, if it was a blended family, I would only deal with the kids whose parents were separating. So I wouldn't have to deal with the other kids. But when I was appointed for a high conflict divorce or high conflict separation, if there were 3 kids, I would see all 3 kids unless one of the kids was turning 18. And then they were no longer considered a child. So that's the only time. And I did have 1 or 2 files where they were older kids, so I couldn't interview them. Well, actually, I can't say that. I did interview them, but I interviewed them on the same basis as I would interview the parents. Mm-hmm. So it was just as a collateral So I mean, I wouldn't just interview parents. I would interview the teachers. I would interview the principal. I would interview, if there was a therapist, I would interview the therapist. So I would interview many collaterals sometimes, just to make sure that I really understood my client.
Okay, and I know you want to get to the tips, and I wanted you to, but you keep bringing up things like, so collaterals, witnesses. Uh, are there specific people that you liked hearing from versus others? Like often we're told don't pick a family member because of course they're going to say wonderful things. But are there specifics, like you mentioned a couple?
Yeah, I would never interview family members other than siblings and parents and maybe grandparents, depending on the situation. My collaterals were usually kind of neutral people, sort of be teachers, coaches if they were into sports, therapists if they were in therapy, and doctors, their GPs. So those kind of were the collaterals that I would interview.
So it's not like when there's a guardian ad litem or a custody evaluator where they're interviewing, each parent has collaterals to say what a great parent they are. You didn't do anything like that.
No, because I don't care what a great parent they are. They could be the best parent in the world. If my client didn't think they were a great parent, that was a concern for me.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop asking more questions and let you start with your tips. Or we're going to be here all night.
Yeah, the only reason I want to do this because for me, this is where I got all my gold from. This is where I got my best magic from my clients. So there were two strategies that I always work with. And parents, you cannot use this on your children because you'll see why. But it worked well for me. So the one thing that I would do, depending on the age of the kid, so I would do this anywhere between the age of 6 and 14. That's when I would do this trick. And so what I would say to them is, imagine that you could create an island. And it's the island of Lisa. That's the name of the island of Lisa. You're going to create this island for me. Tell me every single thing that you would want to put on this island. And we would spend some time together crafting this island. There's going to be a hotel with king-size beds, and there's going to be 17 swimming pools, and there's going to be an all-you-can-eat diner. Like, they would just tell me everything. And by this, I'm already getting an understanding of where their passions are, what they enjoy, all of these things. And we'd spend quite a bit of time creating this island. And then I'd say to them, okay, so the problem with this island is that you can only have 3 forever people on your island. So you can have many people who can come spend the day, a week, people who you can choose to be your forever people on this island. Who are your 3 people? That was very telling for me. And so often if they had 3 siblings and 2 parents, they go, oh, but I got 3 siblings. And I go, okay, siblings can be considered one person. So some, but who they 3, because generally it should really be my siblings, my mom, and my dad. Those should be a child's 3 forever people. Or my grandma, my mom, like so the second they were asking their best friend to be a forever person, I'm going, oh, why aren't the parents their forever people? So that already was, who are their 3 forever people, is very, very important for me. I got a lot of information just asking that question. And then the last question I would say to them is, on this island, you make the rules. So people don't listen to your rules, they get off the island. What are the 3 rules of this island? And those 3 rules also were very telling. And I can tell you, Lisa, 90% of the time was, there's to be no fighting on this island. There's to be no lying on this island. And if you want to get into fights, you're not allowed on this island.
Wow.
It's all about conflict, and how if you were going to bring conflict to my island, you were not allowed on my island. So those things were very, very telling to me. So that was my one magic tool that I got a lot of information out of. The next one was, I would say to my clients, look, we all know that you're smart. We all know that you're smart. But what nobody knows is that I know that you're the smartest person in the world. You're the wisest person in the world, and you've actually got all the answers, and your parents don't know that yet. So if your parents had to come to you and say, we know that you're the smartest kid in the entire world, what advice would you give your parents? And their wisdom was absolutely brilliant. And in the disclosure meetings where I would disclose to the parents, I would say, this is the wisdom from your child, directly from your child. And most times the parents were blown away, like they didn't realize how the children got it. And a lot of the time it was, my parents don't have to love each other, but can they please like each other? Or my parents don't have to love each other, but can they just love me? Or can they just be kind to each other? Generally, that was the wisdom that they were sharing. Or, you know, even in how they wanted to spend their time, telling their parents how they can make it work, what will make it work for them. And so often, that's what I'm saying, you think your children aren't aware of anything, but when you really sit down with them and talk to them, they'll give you the answers. But it can't be in a way, you know, and kids are smart, they don't want to be involved in conflict. So what they'll sometimes do is they'll tell you what they want you to hear so that they can just go and play. And so very often parents will say to me, my child told me in confidence X, Y, and Z about mom or dad, you know, but the child would say the exact same thing to the mom or dad because they didn't care. They just like, if you want me to say that I want to live with you and I hate my dad, that's what I'll tell you. Can I please go play on the PlayStation now? They smart. So you can't always believe everything your child is telling you because they're telling you so you'll leave them alone.
Makes perfect sense. And how touching and kind of heartbreaking the things that those themes that you said just keep coming up with kids.
Yeah. And with the older kids, so with the teenage kids, it was very, they had become very resolved, if that's the right word. It's not the
Resolved?
right word. They become very, it doesn't matter what I say anyway. Can they just do what they want? Just tell me where you want to go and I'll go. I just don't care anymore.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking like apathetic. Yeah. Apathetic, like nothing I say matters, so whatever.
Yeah. And so that was when I had to say to them, and I had to be honest with them. I'd say, listen, what you have to say is important, but I can't promise you're going to get what you want. But the court still wants to hear what is important to you. But at the end of the day, your parents are still the ones, hopefully, making the decision. If your parents aren't the ones making a decision and they're leaving it up to a stranger, just because a stranger, you know, okay to let a stranger control their lives, then at least let that stranger know what's important to you.
Oh, wait a second, Nicolle. For me, you broke up for the last two sentences. Oh, no. Oh, no. I hope she's not getting another call. Can you hear me, Nicolle?
I can hear you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. It started spinning again. All right. Can you say that last little bit about if your parents leave it to the third party to make the decision? That part got a little chopped up.
Yeah. So if your parents can't resolve this amongst themselves for whatever reason, and so they're now leaving the decision of parenting their child to a complete stranger who only knows them from court documents, at least let that stranger know what your true perspective is. Tell me so that I can tell them.
Yeah. Oh, no. All right, you're frozen again, Nicolle, but I did hear that spinning again. All right, now I see you. Now you're nodding. It froze and spun, but good. You came back this time. Okay, so any other tips or bits of wisdom that parents should know? This has been so helpful.
Yeah. You know, I think sometimes what I like to do is just to put a perspective, and you probably do this with your clients as well. But I like to put a perspective of how a child is feeling when their parents are separating. And so the analogy that I use with them is to say, let's just say you had a job. You loved this job. You had two bosses. You loved your bosses. You loved your job. Life was good. You loved going to work every single day. One day your bosses come to you and say, listen, we're splitting up. We just can't work together anymore. We both want you to work for us, but you choose. You choose which boss you want to work for. Okay. How would you choose? And that's exactly what you're asking your child to do. Because then they have to say to both bosses who they love, well, I've chosen this boss because of X, Y, and Z, or I've chosen what you're asking them to do is do a pros and cons list of two people that they love passionately. And so sometimes just getting that perspective of saying, well, what would you do in that situation? Would you just want your bosses to say, listen, we equally want you. We're going to make a decision. We're going to take everything into account. We know your work ethic. We know everything about you. We're going to figure this out and we'll get back to you. But you have to know you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. We're going to make sure you're okay. Wouldn't that give you peace of mind?
Yeah.
And that's an
Doesn't help.
analogy that I sometimes give to the parents. And another thing, that I say to them is, you don't have to tell your child why you're breaking up, why you're splitting. Generally, they have an idea. But it's not helpful to say to a child, mom and dad are breaking up. You've done nothing wrong. You've done nothing wrong. Don't worry about it, okay? That's not helpful for a child, because a child is going to say, it's human nature to say, somebody would only abandon me and leave me if I've done something wrong. And so what a child will go back and think, maybe it was because I didn't bring the groceries in. Maybe it was because I kept saying I refused to load the dishwasher. And so a child will automatically go back and think, what did I do that was so wrong that my parents don't want to live together anymore? And so sometimes you don't have, as I said, you don't have to say to your child, this is what, give them the breakdown and allow them that they're their own venting board, but to say to them, mom and dad are breaking up. There's just a lot of stuff that has been happening between us. We're figuring it out. And if we can't do it, we're going to professionals to help us. You don't have to worry. And if they've got questions, answer the questions to the best of your ability, but don't leave them searching for an answer, because they will think it's them, because that's human nature. They're going to go inwards and think that they must have done something bad somewhere along the line to make you so upset or so angry. So that's really, really important. All kids want is security and stability. Where am I going to sleep? What school am I going to go to? Who's going to pick me up? What's for lunch? That's all I want.
So helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicolle. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who was watching and with us. And I'm sorry for the technical issues.
Oh, you couldn't control that you were getting a call. But we definitely need to continue this conversation, because we haven't even touched on all the stuff with trauma-informed professionals, etc. But say that people want to speak to you or find you, or can you talk a little bit about what you do now?
So, yes, specifically in the area that I'm chatting to you about, I do, I don't call it divorce coaching, I call it peace coaching, because, and I think it's similar to what you do, is you have to control the inner conflict inside. And once you can control that inner conflict inside, you're going to have more control of the conflict on the outside. So for me, it's about, I'm a knowledge broker. So I'm breaking down the knowledge and the information that the lawyer is giving them, because I am still a lawyer. So I understand the strategy. I understand the strategy from the lawyer on the other side. I understand the strategy that your lawyer is giving you. I break down the information, and then I allow you to come to make a decision with clarity and perspective, so that you can go back to your lawyer and saying, these are my clear instructions. I understand what the situation is, and these are my instructions. So for me, it's about working with people so they can gain clarity, and they can understand all the options, and they can provide their lawyer with precise instructions. And you do it as well. You probably do it far better than I do it. But communication. How do you communicate in a text, in an email? How do you communicate to your lawyer? How do you communicate to the collaterals? How do you, if there's a children's lawyer, how do you communicate so that they can see that truly what you want is best and there's no agenda?
That's awesome. Some of it is what we do. We do it a bit differently. I wouldn't call myself a peace coach at all. We do a lot more technical stuff. But I keep thinking of everything that you've shared regarding just parenting and understanding things from the child's perspective. Are you able to help parents deal with things with their kids? Because it seems like this is something you're really good at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I can't speak to the child in this situation. But what I would do is, just like we discussed now, is in that example, dad goes off in rages. Maybe unpack with them the questions that they have to ask to get the correct information. So, say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you approached your child in this way? And so just allow them, because children love attention. So they'll love saying something that the mom or dad wants them to say, so they can go, oh yes, you're on my side. Let's go out for ice cream. So,
I want to go out for ice cream. I'm very suggestible, and now I want to go for ice cream. And you see how much I've been sweating this whole time.
Yeah, so for me it would be perspective, and unless there's always a truth, and you can't believe the sweetness of the chocolatey almond. You have to break away all of that and get to the nugget, to get to the kernel, and
I love your metaphors, but I'm hungry now.
hungry, and you want chocolate.
Yeah.
With
Yes. Okay, so Nicolle, how can people find you? And you don't just deal with Canadians, right?
No, international.
How can people find you?
Yeah. So I have a website. So it's www.lotus-law.com. They can get hold of me through Instagram, which is the Law of the Lotus. And then my email is nicole@lotus-law.com.
Okay, great. And I'll put your Instagram handle here, and people can always find you through us if they can't figure it out otherwise. But thank you again so much for this wonderful interview. Tell David, the recovering litigator, that I said hi. I'll be talking to him soon. I'm sure. I'm interviewing him again in a couple weeks too. But I'm so glad he made the introduction.
Oh, me too. He's wonderful, and you're wonderful. And whoever's going through a terrible time, I know it feels like it's never going to end, but honestly, this too shall pass.
Right. All right, Nicolle, take care, and we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.